I'm executive director with Environmental Health Trust, a scientific think tank focused on research and policy. We publish research, we translate the science, we convene conferences on this issue, and we try to promote safer ways to use technology, both in the United States and worldwide. I am a clinical social worker, long worked in the schools with children, later with adults, after my kids were born. And when I first heard about this, now nearly a decade ago, I thought that I couldn't believe it. And I just couldn't fathom that something that we all use so much could have any effects. And certainly, I believed that wireless and Wi-Fi, which I'd just gotten in my home, were pre-market safety tested. I had a lot of assumptions of safety. What I know now and is that there was no pre-market safety testing for wireless devices, certainly not for cell phones, which were the first type of wireless devices that came on the market. I also believed that there were health and safety organizations that were researching this, that were always making sure that these devices were safe for my family. And what I've come to find out, and what of course we know, is that there are no health and safety agencies in the United States who have done a recent systematic review of the science when it comes to cell phones and wireless radiation. And also we hear, well, the levels are within FCC limits, but as I'm going to talk about now, effects have been found at very low levels, at levels that would be considered low and which are compliant with our federal safety limits.
Something surrounds you, bombards you, some of which you can't see, touch, or even feel. Every day, everywhere you go. It is odorless and tasteless, yet you use it and depend on it every hour of every day. Without it, the world you know could not exist. What is it? Electromagnetic radiation. These waves spread across a spectrum from very short gamma rays to X-rays, ultraviolet rays, visible light waves, even longer infrared waves, microwaves, to radio waves which can measure longer than a mountain range. This spectrum is the foundation of the information age and of our modern world. Your radio, remote control, text message, television, microwave oven, even a doctor's X-ray, all depend on waves within the electromagnetic spectrum. Electromagnetic waves, or EM waves, are similar to ocean waves in that both are energy waves. They transmit energy. EM waves are produced by the vibration of charged particles and have electrical and magnetic properties. But unlike ocean waves that require water, EM waves travel through the vacuum of space at the constant speed of light. EM waves have crests and troughs like ocean waves. The distance between crests is the wavelength. While some EM wavelengths are very long and are measured in meters, many are tiny and are measured in billionths of a meter, nanometers. The number of these crests that pass a given point within 1 second is described as the frequency of the wave. One wave, or cycle, per second is called a hertz. Long EM waves, such as radio waves, have the lowest frequency and carry less energy. Adding energy increases the frequency of the wave and makes the wavelength shorter. Gamma rays are the shortest, highest energy waves in the spectrum. So, as you sit watching TV, not only are there visible light waves from the TV striking your eyes, but also radio waves transmitting from a nearby station, and microwaves carrying cell phone calls and text messages, and waves from your neighbor's Wi-Fi, and GPS units in the cars driving by. There is a chaos of waves from all across the spectrum passing through your room right now. With all these waves around you, how can you possibly watch your TV show? Similar to tuning a radio to a specific radio station, Our eyes are tuned to a specific region of the EM spectrum and can detect energy with wavelengths from 400 to 700 nanometers, the visible light region of the spectrum. Objects appear to have color because EM waves interact with their molecules. Some wavelengths in the visible spectrum are reflected, and other wavelengths are absorbed. This leaf looks green because EM waves interact with the chlorophyll molecules. Waves between 492 and 577 nanometers in length are reflected, and our eye interprets this as the leaf being green. Our eyes see the leaf as green, but cannot tell us anything about how the leaf reflects ultraviolet, microwave, or infrared waves. To learn more about the world around us, scientists and engineers have devised ways to enable us to see beyond that sliver of the EM spectrum called visible light. Data from multiple wavelengths help scientists study all kinds of amazing phenomena on Earth, from seasonal change to specific habitats. Everything around us emits, reflects, and absorbs EM radiation differently based on its composition. A graph showing these interactions across a region of the EM spectrum is called a spectral signature. Characteristic patterns, like fingerprints within the spectra, allow astronomers to identify an object's chemical composition and to determine such physical properties as temperature and density. NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope observed the presence of water and organic molecules in a galaxy 3.2 billion light-years away. Viewing our Sun in multiple wavelengths with the SOHO satellite allows scientists to study and understand sunspots that are associated with solar flares and eruptions harmful to satellites, astronauts, and communications here on Earth. We are constantly learning more about our world and universe by taking advantage of the unique information contained in the different waves across the EM spectrum.
Now, the electromagnetic spectrum, this is information from ARPANSA, actually goes all the way from the invisible to the visible, ionizing radiation, gamma rays, X-rays over here, and light here. This is from ARPANSA. You will see here they say FM radio, microwave oven, radiant heat. Of course, microwave oven actually happens to be of the same frequency as the cell phone, the mobile phone. The mobile phone and the microwave oven use a very similar frequency. The difference between them is power. The power of the microwave oven is 1,000 watts. And of course, that's power that can heat up a cup of water in maybe 60 seconds. The microwave oven, the mobile phone, the cordless phone, the Wi-Fi monitor, the baby monitor, they all use the same frequency. They differ in power. They also differ because mobile phones and Wi-Fi devices emit pulsed microwave radiation. It's the pulse, not the power, that appears to be biologically most important. The pulse that is erratic and irregular, like for thousands of minutes a month, for dozens of hours a week, over a lifetime, that irregular pulsed signal may be much more biologically important. And in fact, the continuous wave signals have a lot of therapeutic effects as are being applied in medicine today. This visualization from my colleague at the University of Athens shows you the variation in frequency, in amplitude, in pulse. All of these variables influence the properties a signal have and how it can affect a biological system. This is just to show you what happens in a 4-second mobile phone call. This is power density indicated here. And of course, a phone is on standby, it's not doing too much, but 900 times a minute, it's looking for a signal. It says to the tower, where are you? Here I am. Where are you? Here I am.
The safety limits that in the United States were adopted by the Federal Communications Commission over 2 decades ago. They're based on 30-year-old science, and that science was on small animals. for short-term exposures, not long-term exposures, which is how we're exposed now to wireless devices. What happened was in the 90s, the Environmental Protection Agency was actually developing proper safety limits for the public, and they were defunded in about 1995, 1996, and the Telecom Act was passed, and the FCC adopted limits based on heating effects only. And just as an example, this is how cell phones are tested with a really antiquated system on the head of a 220-pound male. And there was no documentation on impacts to children or pregnant women. So we had these outdated limits in the United States. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, our nation's largest doctor association for children, has issued several letters to our government and to Congress calling for an update to our FCC limits, saying that they are outdated, that they don't address children, and they also don't address the way that we use cell phones and wireless devices today.
So a growing number of prominent doctors and scientists are raising warning flags over radiation this morning, and your kids could be facing a greater risk of exposure. NBC national correspondent Miguel Almaguer was granted rare access inside a cell phone test lab.
You see them every day, everywhere, kids on phones. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, children are now exposed to an exponentially greater amount of radio frequency than any adult will ever be in a lifetime. Part of the problem, this isn't your mother's flip phone. Smartphones today have multiple antennas located inside the phone. When you talk, text, stream music, or videos, they emit non-iodizing radiation, similar to a low-powered microwave oven.
And it's the irregular, pulsed nature of the signal over thousands of minutes, over many years, that we believe can cause a great problem for children and for the rest of us as well.
Cell phone providers say they follow all safety guidelines put into place by the FCC. Those cell phone companies then work with labs like this one to test your device.
The current FCC safety standard was developed nearly 20 years ago. The test at Sedicom in Milpitas, California, starts by taping a phone to the ear of a plastic head. The size of a 200-pound man, it's filled with liquid.
The fluids used in these tests best replicate the same properties inside the human head. Scientists are then able to determine how much radiation penetrates the head when you're talking on the phone.
The robotic arm precisely moves to various hotspots on the head to test the specific absorption rate. The phone we tested was within the FCC allowed radiation limit, but critics say these standards are outdated and urge the federal agency to adopt stricter radiation guidelines. Current FCC standards do not account for the unique vulnerability and use patterns specific to pregnant women and children, warns the American Academy of Pediatrics in a letter to the FCC.
Children are not little adults. The skull is thinner. Also, the volume of the brain is less compared to 200-plus size man.
The U.S. Government Accountability Office also asked the FCC to reassess the exposure limit, in particular the radiation limit when you have your cell phone close to your body, like in your pocket or when you hold it directly next to your head, or as some teens do, sleep with it on their pillow.
Phones are transmitting radiation so long as they're connected to the internet and connected to the Wi-Fi. And even if you're not talking on your phone is talking to the tower.
Critics of the FCC's current guidelines give this simple advice to all consumers. Use the speakerphone or an earpiece, and remember, distance is your friend. Keeping a phone even a few inches off your body reduces exposure several thousand times. For today, Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Milpitas, California.
Health agencies from other countries, including Canada, Israel, and France, recommend limiting a child's exposure to cell phone radiation. The FCC tells NBC News, quote, "The U.S. has among the most conservative standards in the world. As part of our routine review of these standards, we're soliciting input from multiple stakeholder experts, including federal health agencies and others, to guide our assessment." Makes you think twice as a parent, though.
Absolutely.
Especially one whose kids are on the cell phone a lot.
Yeah, when you think about that, they're particularly vulnerable. This is all such new technology. I think we have yet to really see the effects.
I know that schools in our county were tested, and when parents raised this issue, and we're told that, oh, it's so low, it's so much lower than what our FCC limits allow. FCC limits, our limits actually for what's allowed kind of ambiently in the air are higher than several countries' limits by 100 and even more times. So I should add that many countries have precautionary limits in place. I just published a paper with Frank Clegg and several other experts on how to reduce radio frequency, which is wireless in buildings. And this paper also, and Frank Clegg is former Microsoft Canada. And the reason I have a picture of him here is that you can watch a short 10-minute video where he also summarizes the science, his concerns, and his recommendations.
Hello, my name is Frank Clegg, and I've spent over 40 years in the technology sector. My most recent position as a president of Microsoft Canada. In my career, I've seen the tremendous benefit that technology can provide. I've also seen the potential harm if technology is not implemented correctly. And I believe our current implementation of wireless technology is not safe. That's why I co-founded Canadians for Safe Technology and why I joined the business advisory group of the Environmental Health Trust. I am especially concerned about our current implementation of 5G wireless technology. And the more research I do and the more experts I talk to, the more concerned I become. Now, there's no doubt that there are benefits such as autonomous vehicle and faster download speeds. At the same time, I think there is potential harm. I think it's important that we understand that 5G is not just an incremental number on our cell phones. In fact, over 230 scientists and researchers from 41 countries around the world have formally written to the United Nations, their member nations, and the World Health Organization, expressing their concern over the planned rollout of 5G technology, especially for vulnerable populations such as children, pregnant women, and the environmentally sensitive. They have been joined by state legislatures and federal regulators who have asked the FCC to provide evidence that there is no harm from the rollout of 5G technology. There is no doubt that the engineers and businesses and companies that roll out technology are well-meaning. However, their focus is on being first to market and getting new products into the market as efficiently and quickly as they can. I am not aware of any research or studies by my industry or related industry that deal at all with the health or safety effects of wireless technology. Here are some important facts about 5G. 5G technology has not been tested. I am not aware of a single study that shows that 5G technology is safe. 5G, as in all other wireless technology, gives off radio frequency radiation, which is absorbed in the human body and accumulates in the human body. One segment of 5G technology are millimeter waves. Millimeter waves are used by the US and Israeli government in their active denial systems, which are used for crowd control. And what they do is they provide a very painful reaction in the skin organs of the body. We have no idea what the impacts will be to human health if that kind of millimeter wave technology is used and we're exposed to it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are significant proven health effects from wireless technology and wireless devices. These include insomnia, headaches, fatigue, heart palpitations, all caused by exposure to wireless devices and the radiation from them. More serious symptoms and conditions include heart arrhythmia, infertility, tinnitus, numbness or tingling in the extremities, diabetes, cancer, and permanent DNA damage. Mental health is also impacted, with increased anxiety, depression, rises in ADHD and autism, mood swings, and emotional instability. In fact, all of these health factors and conditions have risen exponentially over the last 30 years, and hundreds of studies that show proof of biological harm from wireless devices. Most recently, in 2018, the National Institute of Health's National Toxicology Program released the findings of a 14-year, $25 million study that showed clear evidence of harm in terms of cancer and permanent DNA damage. This study, several months later, was verified by the prestigious Ramazzini Institute out of Italy, which found the same results. Now you may ask how a product that has this potential harm could ever be released to the market and to the public for public use. Well, the way the process works is the FCC regulates all wireless devices and products associated with them. Unfortunately, the FCC is made up of previous telecom executives, lawyers, and engineers. It does not have any scientists or doctors that you would expect to be involved with the regulation of potentially harmful products. In fact, the FCC guidelines are 20 years out of date without any major significant improvement. Countries such as China, Russia, Italy, and Switzerland have safety guidelines that are 100 times safer for their citizens. The FCC guidelines are based on small, short-term, infrequent exposure. They do not worry about the accumulated effects for multiple devices.
He has started an organization in Canada dedicated to protecting the public and raising awareness, kind of like we have here in the United States with Environmental Health Trust. And we talk about adverse effects found at lower levels, and also, importantly, how to reduce exposure in buildings. And you can watch that video online. So I was shocked that every wireless device actually has instructions to keep a distance from the body. And the reason they have these instructions, so for iPhones, actually, this is the iPhone 4, which is 10 millimeters away from your body. Now, the newer iPhones are 5 millimeters away from the body. Laptops, my laptop says that there should be a separation of 20 centimeters from the body, which is about 8 inches. Cordless phones. The reason that they have this is that they are tested. They are tested for pre-market radiation emissions to be compliant at a distance. They're not tested touching the body. And that's one of the reasons that the American Academy of Pediatrics has been writing about devices being tested the way we're using them. There are so many studies, I'm not going to go into all of them, but just to give you a sampling of them, that have found impacts, not only in terms of increased cancer, but also damage to the brain. So here's a study that looked, it was a replication study, that looked at teenagers with 1 year of cell phone use when they had the phone to the head. And after 1 year, they found memory damage in the teenagers who consistently held the phone to one side of their head. And the studies, the research that they did, tested the kids with a test that would look at specific memory centers that were on the side of the head that the teens held the phone. Whoops, why isn't this showing? Children absorb proportionally more wireless radiation than adults, both into their brains and into their bodies. So here is an example, and this is utilizing information from published research, where researchers, there's many studies like this where I'm going to show you what's going to look to be like a heat map, showing different parts of the brain, tissues of the brain, and how they absorb the wireless. This is a computer simulation, which took hours and hours on a supercomputer to show, I'm just going to pause it for a minute, when a phone, and I'm going to show you other wireless devices as well, is close to the body, the absorption, the different rates of absorption into the brain. So you can see the different colors. The white and yellow are the highest rate of absorption. Then it goes to orange, then purple and blue. And you can see with the phone close to the head, the intensity is higher, of course, near where the device is. And this is these are images, splices from research, and it's actually slowed down quite significantly. And research finds, and the World Health Organization cites this research, that the bone marrow can absorb up to 10 times as much as adult bone marrow. And there's quite significant research showing impacts of cell phone radiation to the brain and brain development. I want to speak a bit about impacts to pregnant women, because they are our most vulnerable, is the developing baby. And this is Chief of Obstetrics at Yale, Dr. Hugh Taylor, who is a National Academy of Sciences researcher, also delivers babies and teaches. And he has signed on, along with over 200 and I think now about 240 scientists, onto a appeal to reduce exposure to pregnant women, which includes keeping the phone away from the abdomen, staying away from Wi-Fi routers, and all kinds of ways to reduce exposure. And I'll share that with you after, the resources from the Baby Safe Project, if you're not familiar with it. But I'd like to share with you research that he did on mice. But what he talks about is how, when he took mice and exposed them to cell phone radiation in cages, and then some not to cell phone radiation, he found damaged memory and increased hyperactivity. And what he says is that if mice could have ADHD, that is what they had. And he also talks about how, in the context of the larger body of research, which has found impacts to behavior, associations between wireless exposure and behavioral issues, that this demonstrates a cause and effect.
The fetus is perhaps the most vulnerable to these types of insults. When the brain is just forming, we are perhaps at our most vulnerable stage. So this is a study that really looked at only the effect of prenatal exposure to cell phone radiation. What effect does having a cell phone near your baby when you're pregnant have on that baby later on in life when that baby's grown up? We tested these mice when they reached adulthood and looked at the lasting effect of that early prenatal cell phone exposure. The mice who were exposed to cell phones were more hyperactive. They were running around the cage a lot more aggressively. They had poorer memory. They couldn't remember objects in the cage as well as their counterparts who weren't exposed to the cell phone radiation. But they did not have any increased anxiety, as sometimes running around can be a sign of anxiety. It was not that. They were calm and relaxed. So they were running around these cages, bouncing off the walls, not a care in the world. Something that, in our eyes, resembles attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in children. That was the closest model we can think of to the behavioral effects that we saw in the mice.
When I first saw Hugh Taylor's study, I was thrilled and really deeply concerned, because I was aware of research earlier looking at what happens inside the brain. And if you look at something called the dentate gyrus, which occurs here and is quite critical to where brain cells form for thinking and learning, you can see that prenatally exposed rats develop smaller brains with more brain damage.
The brain is tremendously resilient, but when there's so many environmental insults at once, the circuitry in the brain becomes overwhelmed. And unlike what we have in our electrical wiring in homes, where there's a circuit breaker that can stop the electrical flow before it causes damage, the brain doesn't have that same capacity. And so environmental insults, when they add up, the circuitry is especially vulnerable.
We have some human evidence now where a few studies have followed women with exposures to electromagnetic fields, and they have seen that their children who were exposed to more electromagnetic radiation tend to have more learning disabilities and more problems in school.
Mothers who spent a lot of time on the cell phone, carried a cell phone with them during their pregnancies, had a higher risk of having children with behavioral problems. And I think when you have clear cause and effect relationship in mice and an association in women, that women who use these cell phones had children with more behavioral problems, I think that's together very powerful evidence saying that this is truly a cause and effect in humans as well. The mouse studies prove that it's really causative, that the cell phones are causing it. It's not just because of some other behaviors linked to cell phones in women.
There are many appeals. This is a 2015 appeal by scientists saying that numerous studies have found effects at levels below our guidelines, and those include increased cancer risk. And our scientists believe, several of our scientists believe that the research is now proven, showing that there's an association between exposure and cancer. Cellular stress, genetic damage, DNA damage, changes to the reproductive system, learning and memory deficits, neurological disorders, and negative impacts on general well-being.
The combined evidence, in my view, is that there is now sufficient evidence that radiofrequency radiation is carcinogenic to humans. That's IR category 1, and you can't ignore that. And the implications of this, we have to be cautious. Radiofrequency radiation is now ubiquitous. We're probably exposed to it in this room, even though we do not want to be.
So how are children exposed in schools, at home? This is a simulation of a tablet and a 6-year-old. And what you can see is sort of the way the radiation, which is, I should mention, non-ionizing radiation. It's not the same as X-rays or nuclear power. And it comes off, this is a tablet and a 6-year-old child. And what they did is they modeled the rate of absorption into the 6-year-old child's head, looking at the structure of their skull, the different tissues in the head, and you can see the same colors that we talked about before, showing where the intensity, where the highest rate of absorption is, and as it gets lower, and you can see the white, yellow, and orange, and how when you have a device that is emitting wireless radiation, it is going to be absorbed into our body, of course, with the most intense rate of absorption to whatever is called.
Now this is a simulation of the Wi-Fi electrical field in a 6-year-old child facing a tablet. We have the tablet at 150 millimeters from the head, which is a little less than 6 inches. We can also take a closer look at the Wi-Fi field in the brain by using different scales. We use anatomically based models of people. This means that we simulate the absorption of different parts in the body, such as the skull, regions of the brain, the bones, eyes, and dozens of other tissues. These animations are slowed down by about 5 billion times. Most people are not aware that the waves of the Wi-Fi electrical fields oscillated 2 billion times a second through our bodies. Wireless devices emit microwaves, and these images show the intensity of the fields absorbed into the human body.
And this is showing, this is also work by engineers in Brazil who simulated a laptop on the lap. And the first images that you see right now are looking at what the way it moves off of the, I'm going to pause this. This was the way it moves off of the antenna, and that this is the antenna right here, this little pyramid. And then they do a finer perspective, the rate of absorption into the tissues of the body. And you can see here where, again, the most intense absorption is near where the antenna is. But it's still going through the body. You can see the chest. and all of these are online. So in schools, children are exposed to, I know in the public schools here, every child, if there's 30 kids in a room and a teacher, you have laptops, they all have cell phones, which might be in their pockets or resting on their lap. And then there are access points, which are the routers, are the access points that then the laptops connect with. And they're all connecting with each other in a classroom, which makes it a unique environment. Actually, here's examples of an access point, which you can find on the ceiling or on the side of the wall. Now, insurance companies do not take the risk. They do not insure wireless manufacturers of cell phones in this country for the effects of long-term exposure, damages from long-term exposure. And there are actually several white papers that have been published by insurance companies considering the potential future impacts of electromagnetic radiation as high. And I just have the cover of one, the next asbestos. EMFs are defined as a pollutant in many insurance policies, and they are not covered generally in many policies because of the potential future claims that could result. And we have all of that on our website. Actually, I want to just check the time. Okay, it's 9:19. So there are policies happening worldwide and in the United States related to wireless in schools, and I'll show wireless in general. This is an example. In Oregon, a bill was passed relating to exposure to radiation in schools and calling for a report that investigates the health effects of wireless, especially to children, and that will look at guidelines for schools after the report has been completed, and work with the Oregon Health Authority to conduct a review of peer-reviewed, independently funded studies on the effects of exposure to microwave wireless radiation in schools and similar environments. And we have this information all online, as well as the testimony for this bill, which is really, really interesting, because I know many people, at least I certainly, now almost a decade ago when I got involved in this, thought, well, no one else is talking about this. And it turns out not only in the United States, but also worldwide, there is action on this. And in fact, entire countries which recommend reducing exposure and have actually banned wireless in classrooms for young children.
The Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation wants a moratorium on Wi-Fi in the Limestone School Board. The teacher union's president says there is a growing mountain of evidence that Wi-Fi can pose health risks, concerns that Andrea Loken is taking to school trustees.
There are thousands of published peer-reviewed papers that are indicating adverse health effects from Wi-Fi. And we are seeing an increasing awareness around this issue worldwide.
Loken says countries like France, Israel, and Italy are all taking steps to ban Wi-Fi in schools and daycares. The World Health Organization has listed Wi-Fi in the same category as other potentially cancer-causing substances.
That's in the same category as lead, exhaust fumes, DDT.
The Elementary Teachers Federation supports calls for a Wi-Fi school ban, adding there are also teachers who suffer from electro-hypersensitivity.
Symptoms are not the same in every person because it's not an easy diagnosis to get, and when you do get a diagnosis, you have to go to Toronto to get it.
Both teacher union leaders say their fight isn't with the school board. They say they want to raise awareness about the need for a Wi-Fi moratorium until further health studies are completed and lawmakers can catch up with new regulations.
We're going to the trustees because they are the only group that can really make the blanket decision for the board.
No one from the Limestone District School Board was available for an on-camera interview, but they did issue this statement that reads in part, Providing safe and appropriate places to learn and work is a priority for the Limestone District School Board. Trustees understand and are sensitive to the safety concerns some community members have regarding the use of Wi-Fi in schools. Loken says there are alternatives like Ethernet to deliver the internet and technology into classrooms.
In Maryland, where I live, when I went to the Department of Health actually on this issue, they said that this was several years ago. They said, well, we don't even have anyone looking at this. You should go to the Maryland State Children's Environmental Health and Protection Advisory Council. This is a 19-member body with people, representatives from our legislature, as well as doctors, scientists, pediatricians, and they issued a report recommending limiting exposure as much as feasibly practical in schools. And they describe how to do that by keeping the device away from the body, and especially by using wired internet connections whenever possible, especially in new builds, when you have a new building. And that is also online. And that's the first state body to make recommendations of this kind in the United States relating to wireless in schools. Actually, it's a few years ago. In Cyprus, where wireless is banned in nursery schools, as it is in France and French Polynesia and Israel, actually, they have a public health campaign for the public. This is the back of a bus. And on one side, you can see the bus, and on the other side, the translation, "Don't irradiate me, learn how to protect me." And there's actually handouts on how to reduce exposure to wireless that the Children's Environmental Health Committee gives out, as well as they have removed the wireless from the Archbishop Macarius Hospital and the pediatric units, and they're educating parents as well on why they are doing that and how they can reduce exposure at home. The Pan-Cypriot Cyprus Medical Association, the Vienna Medical Association have issued recommendations on reducing exposure to wireless and cell phones.
Τα παιδιά μας εκτίθενται καθημερινά σε ένα ηλεκτρονικό νέφος, το οποίο δημιουργείται από την ακτινοβολία που εκπέμπουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνα, tablets και οι συνδέσεις μέσω Wi-Fi και άλλα παρόμοια. Η ακτινοβολία αυτή, σύμφωνα με τον Παγκόσμιο Οργανισμό Υγείας, είναι πιθανώς καρκινογόνα για τον άνθρωπο. Σύμφωνα με νεότερες έρευνες, η ακτινοβολία αυτή είναι πιθανό να προκαλέσει και άλλες σοβαρές επιδράσεις στην ανάπτυξη και λειτουργία του εγκεφάλου, του αναπαραγωγικού και άλλων συστημάτων του εμβρίου και του παιδιού, να προκαλέσει καταστροφή των νευρικών κυττάρων και του DNA, διάσπαση της προσοχής, διαταραχές στη μάθηση και άλλες νευρολογικές παθήσεις. Τα παιδιά είναι πολύ ευάλωτα. Μπορούμε όμως σε σημαντικό βαθμό να τα προφυλάξουμε από ένα σοβαρό κίνδυνο. Φτάνει να μάθουμε πώς.
Αφού μας αγαπάτε, γιατί μας ακτινοβολείτε με τα Wi-Fi και τα κινητά σας τηλέφωνα? Έχουμε δικαίωμα στην υγεία και πρώτοι εσείς μπορείτε και πρέπει να μας προφυλάξετε.
Στη βάση της αρχής της προφύλαξης, το Συμβούλιο της Ευρώπης, το Ευρωκοινοβούλιο, επιστήμονες, ιατρικοί και εκπαιδευτικοί σύλλογοι στην Ευρώπη συμβουλεύουν ότι θα πρέπει να μειωθεί η έκθεση των παιδιών στην ακτινοβολία που εκπέμπουν τα κινητά τηλέφωνα, tablets και οι συνδέσεις μέσω Wi-Fi, ιδίως στο σπίτι και στο σχολείο.
Η έκθεση των παιδιών σε ηλεκτρονικό νέφος εγκυμονεί κινδύνους. Η χρήση των κινητών και συσκευών Wi-Fi από παιδιά μικρότερα των 14 ετών πρέπει να αποφεύγεται. Προφυλάξτε την υγεία και το μέλλον των παιδιών σας. Το ίδιο ισχύει και για την έγκυο. Οι έφηβοι ποτέ δεν βάζουν το κινητό στο υπνοδωμάτιο τους, στις τσέπες τους, στα μπράτσα ή κοντά στο στήθος τους. Πάντα χρησιμοποιούν hands-free και κρατούν το κινητό μακριά από το σώμα τους.
Αξιοποιώ την τεχνολογία σωστά. Γνωρίζω τους κινδύνους και δεν εξαρτώμαι από αυτή. Χρησιμοποιώ ενσύρματη σύνδεση για τον υπολογιστή του σπιτιού μου και ενεργοποιώ το Wi-Fi και τα δεδομένα κινητής τηλεφωνίας μόνο όταν χρειάζεται και ποτέ όταν τα παιδιά μου είναι κοντά. Δεν χρησιμοποιώ κινητό τηλέφωνο στο αυτοκίνητο όταν τα παιδιά μου βρίσκονται σε αυτό. Η έκθεση στην ακτινοβολία είναι πολύ μεγαλύτερη. Προστατεύω πάντα τα παιδιά μου.
Η Γαλλία ήδη με νόμο απαγόρευσε τη χρήση Wi-Fi σε παιδικούς σταθμούς και σε χώρους όπου φιλοξενούνται παιδιά κάτω των 3 χρόνων. Επιτρέπει ελάχιστη χρήση στα σχολεία κάτω από αυστηρούς περιορισμούς.
Στον νηπιαγωγείο, στο σχολείο και στο σπίτι περνάμε τουλάχιστον το 75% του χρόνου μας. Απαιτούμε ασφάλεια, χωρίς ακτινοβολίες από Wi-Fi, κινητά και άλλες ασύρματες συνδέσεις. Η υγεία είναι δικαίωμα. Μην μας το στερείτε.
Δεν έχουμε το δικαίωμα να ρισκάρουμε την υγεία των παιδιών μας αναμένοντας παθητικά τους άλλους να κάνουν κάτι. Ας ξεχάσουμε τι είναι βολικό για μας και ας τους χαρίσουμε το καλύτερο δώρο, την υγεία τους, μετατρέποντας το σπίτι και το σχολείο σε όαση προστασίας.
Το σπίτι μου είναι όαση αγάπης και ασφάλειας. Σβήνω τα Wi-Fi και άλλες ασύρματες συνδέσεις όταν δεν χρησιμοποιούνται και κυρίως όταν τα παιδιά είναι στο σπίτι και τα κλείνω πάντοτε το βράδυ. Αξιοποιώ το κουμπάκι on-off. Είναι τόσο απλό να μειώσω το χρόνο αχρίαστης έκθεσης. Επενδύω στην υγεία των παιδιών μου μακροχρόνια.
Η ζωή και το μέλλον τους είναι στα δικά μας χέρια. Δώστε στα παιδιά ένα μοναδικό δώρο ζωής, την υγεία τους.
Dr. Leonard Hardell, just wanted to, people say, well, many people have said, well, this is against, this isn't what mainstream scientists are putting out there. Well, actually, I showed you the EMF appeal with over 240 scientists signing on. There's actually several other appeals. We're looking at much more than 240 independent scientists. But I wanted to point to Dr. Leonard Hardell because he wrote a letter he's written several letters on reducing wireless to schools and published, he's one of the preeminent researchers publishing on cell phone radiation, the Swedish studies. He was in the World Health Organization International Agency for the Research on Cancer working group investigating this back in 2011. And he also, previous to working on wireless, worked on Agent Orange and DDT. And many years ago, he was ringing the alarm bell and saying, this is associated with cancer. And of course was attacked for that many decades ago. He's one of the leading researchers on that. So he's published multiple times on this, and you can find his research on our website. And he believes, as well as several other researchers, that radio frequency emissions from wireless is carcinogenic based on the research, the experimental and the human research and the cellular studies. And this is just a quick clip from a Congress meeting several years ago where Dr. David Carpenter at the University of Albany's Institute for Health and the Environment is first speaking, and then Dr. Hardell, and they actually had a moment where they started talking about schools, and I thought I would play it.
And I think I'd like to expand a little bit on what I see as one of the critical issues, and that is the use of Wi-Fi classrooms in schools. When you have a router and a classroom with 10 or 20 children on wireless laptops, you have a situation where there is an enormous level of radio frequency radiation in that room. Now, we know from the studies of people that have become electrosensitive that often there is an initiating exposure, a high level of exposure. So not only are children more vulnerable to every environmental exposure, but if we allow our children in schools where they're supposed to be learning to be exposed to an agent that reduces their ability to pay attention and to learn and promotes illness, this is a tragedy, it's foolish, and we should act right there to reduce exposure. Exposure comes from other sources as well, but that is perhaps the most obvious step that we could take immediately. When a wired computer classroom will not result in exposure, will have the same access to the internet that every child needs. But to rush ahead and make everything wireless without contemplating the long-term health effects is unwise.
It's almost to open the already open doors, to reinforce the necessity to, I would say, to ban the wireless internet communications in schools. I see this as the rising big problem for human health. Authorities say that the exposure is within the ICNIRP guidelines, and we know that the ICNIRP guidelines do not take care of long-term effects or of non-thermal effects. That's to say, the effects we can see which are not depending on tissue heating. I think we need quite a lot of education of the society. What is this about? We need to educate the medical profession, because doctors and other working in the medical profession are mostly unaware of these health problems and think that the exposure is not a problem.
They're reiterating statements that many scientists are putting forward. And my first question was, well, how can this be? I mean, I have wireless in my home. My kids are on wireless all the time. At the time when I learned about this, which is about a decade ago now, we only used the cell phone for long distance. That's how I had my kids talk to their grandparents, because it was free. We had a cell phone and we had a landline. And well, how did this happen? So there are several investigations into this, and there's a Harvard report I'll point to that talks about the FCC as a captured agency, how there is so many millions of dollars from industry in not only in the science, but also in our government, in the agencies that we think will protect us. And this is a really important report. It talks about wireless in schools. It talks about cell phones. At this point, it really should be updated because there's so much more going on in the field. That's Norm Alster, captured agency with the Harvard SAFRA Center for Ethics. There's published research that finds that when there's money or industry sponsorship of studies, that they more often show no effect, whereas when they're independent, they more often show an effect. Big wireless is using the same tactics as big tobacco. And in fact, we find often the same scientists testifying in court cases, the same law firms and PR firms. Oh, and this is just showing the non-industry studies versus industry studies. And one of the problems is that there's a lot of reliance on industry-funded research, both by our federal government and in these international authorities that we often look to. I also wanted to mention, before I move on to what schools can do, is there's also the issue of blue light from devices. And there was just a report by the French, basically like the French FDA, the French Agency for Food, Environmental and Occupational Health and Safety, stating that blue light is phototoxic, children's developing eyes don't have protections to filter blue light until adulthood, and they're still being affected, but they are, as a child, you're not able to filter out from your retina as much blue light. And they have really strong recommendations on limiting exposure and the need for protections in the devices themselves on blue light. They also just came out with a report calling for all phones and devices to be tested at body contact. And they recommend, of course, reducing exposure to cell phones and wireless. There are medical experts worldwide recommending reducing exposure to cell phone radiation. I have a couple of them here, of which I've talked about.
This is a big first for the California Department of Public Health. It's releasing guidelines about cell phone radiation and how you can avoid it.
When you sleep, you keep the cell phone at least arm's length from your body. And also not carrying your cell phone in your pocket, having it either in your purse or not carrying it with you.
The research suggests cell phones could increase our risk for brain cancer and tumors, low sperm count, headaches, impaired memory, hearing, and sleep.
Currently, we're not doing a good job in regulating the radiation from these devices. In fact, we're doing an abysmal job.
Dr. Joel Moskowitz of UC Berkeley says this is a long time coming. He's partially responsible for bringing this information to light. He sued the Department of Public Health for refusing to release information about the dangers of cell phone radiation back in 2009. He won.
People are being injured and harmed by the delay in having this information accessible to them.
So the question remains, does this release mean the state now believes cell phones are dangerous?
Not at all. Our position is that the science is evolving.
As I said, many countries have banned Wi-Fi in nursery school. Cyprus in elementary school. In Israel, they have restrictions on wireless in the younger grades. And in some communities, like in Haifa, they have hardwired all the schools so that, and the mayor had called for, no wireless in schools, and now they have hard wires in, and there's a talk. We helped coordinate a conference in Israel a few years ago. You can go online and you can watch all of it. It was an entire week with experts from over a dozen countries. And the chief of IT at Haifa did a talk on how he installed these hardwired points. Like, how do you set up a classroom so that kids can be using wired connections rather than wireless? And he showed examples of that.
Okay, I want to jump. Okay, what did we do? One class looks like this. We have a partition within the class. It works. It is wireline, okay? The partition is about 80 centimeters, 1 meter. It works. The teacher says it is not so convenient, but it works. Another class that we deployed is this kind of, because as I said, not all, it's only 1 hour a day. So they use it this way, and they are happy. They say, okay, the results are very good. Labs, of course, the tables are fixed to the floor. Okay. The main problem is that we have a constraint. We have to keep the class flexible. So in the labs, it's quite easy. We fix the tables to the floor. There is another idea that I get from Gideon about puts in different places on the walls. So whenever they want to use the internet, they can shift the tables and connect to the wire line. And I'm sure there are many other options.
In the middle is a picture of the removal of Wi-Fi from St. Augustine in Italy, where it's a private school where they ceremoniously took down the router and installed hardwired connections. This technology rolled out before we had adequate research on long-term exposure, and before we had protections in place, because there are solutions. There need to be new policies for cell phones and digital device use in classrooms that address vision, posture, addiction, and the radiation issues. Corded phones in every room and for student use in common areas so that they can reach their parents if they need to at whatever time is appropriate. There needs to be a way so that communication between, I mean, I know I've got 2 teenagers and schedules change, and they call me during lunch from the corded phone at the front office, or sometimes I call to the secretary at the front desk and they get the message to my kids, but I don't have any extraneous conversations. It's only when there's a change and I have to pre-plan. I have to be like, hey, today this is happening. You got your schedule down so that everyone knows what the plan is rather than last minute scheduling all the time. And when there is, then we have to communicate. And wired rather than wireless networks in schools, setting up computer rooms, getting hard wires on the sides of each classroom so that kids can have access to technology. I do not advocate, nor does any of our researchers know technology. Rather, we want to use safe technology, especially for children.
Welcome back. Now, just last week, Adelaide CBD became one of the world's biggest Wi-Fi hotspots. For the tech-savvy, it's a priceless convenience. But Wi-Fi has some health experts worried. They fear it's damaging our health and we won't know the full effects for generations to come. Here's Jade Robram with one Adelaide school that's taking no chances.
Book. What do these letters mean? Could they give a clue to who he is or what he was doing at the time? We decided to write.
Within 12 months I fell pregnant and miscarried at 11 weeks. I then subsequently went on and had 10 miscarriages in this home.
Are we facing the biggest health crisis of the 21st century?
Potentially in 20, 30 years' time we may look back and say, gee, why did we do that to our children?
Without even knowing it, we're constantly being bombarded by an invisible fog of wireless radiation that could be making us sick. So, are we being fried by Wi-Fi? Single mother Trish Garcia thinks she is. She suffers from what has been called Wi-Fi sensitivity, and now her 12-year-old daughter is showing the same symptoms.
Headaches, even if it's just a little bit, it just kind of progresses, and heartburn sometimes, and fatigue, you know, feeling really tired, and nausea if it gets really bad. And usually when I'm using things like iPads or iPods or those kinds of like touchscreen things, or even if I'm playing PlayStation for too long.
Georgie noticed her condition grew worse at school, becoming so bad that in March this year she asked her mum if she could leave. She's now being homeschooled.
I was devastated. I cried for about 3 days because I was just so happy with all my friends and, you know, all my teachers. I had a good relationship with all my teachers and I was doing so well, and I was just so upset that I couldn't keep doing that. It was terrible.
There's no doubt in my mind that Georgie's exposure to Wi-Fi and the iPads at school over, you know, a period of time has accumulated and has caused her to have these symptoms that are, you know, made her quite ill.
The exposures in a school environment are actually much higher than in any home environment. And whether or not you're using the Wi-Fi, that router is emitting microwave radiation. And so you're constantly exposed.
Dr. Magna Havas is a leading expert on electromagnetic radiation in Canada. She believes there's a great risk when it comes to Wi-Fi and children.
It's an emerging health issue because we've got evidence now that it's been linked to cancers, to reproductive problems, to electrohypersensitivity, to heart palpitations. So we're really dealing with a tsunami.
Wi-Fi is now considered a necessity in most schools and workplaces. It's revolutionised the way we work, learn and live. Even though Wi-Fi emits low-rating radiation waves, the problem is it's everywhere.
Progressive countries like France, Russia, Israel, Italy, China, Switzerland, their exposure standards are 100 times lower than what's allowed in Australia.
A former NASA scientist mapped transmission waves across Washington, D.C. The city is covered. Many of us go about our days unaffected. But those that are, like Nicole Belsma, it can be life-changing for all the wrong reasons.
To have 10 miscarriages, you're like, just what is going on?
Oh, look, miscarriages are emotionally, physically exhausting.
Her body was being affected by radiation sensitivity.
Yes, I do believe that the AC magnetic field we were sleeping in as a result of being on the other side of the wall of the meter box had contributed to the miscarriages.
Nicole moved house and is now a happy and healthy mother of 3. She's also the author of Healthy Home, Healthy Family and is campaigning to have Wi-Fi removed from schools.
There's no complicated login, you don't need to do anything, you just simply find the SSID, click and away you go.
Last week, internet provider Internode, the state government and the city council launched a multi-million-dollar initiative to make Adelaide's CBD the biggest Wi-Fi hotspot in the world.
This is the largest public network in the country, and credit to the state government, city council, for having the vision and I guess to take the city into the 21st century.
Not having technology as a focus means that our children are thinking in a much more responsible and productive way.
One place that switched off its Wi-Fi connection is Upper Sturt Primary School. Principal Barb Jones.
There's not enough evidence that Wi-Fi is completely safe at this stage. We haven't had it long enough.
It was very difficult to find a school that was Wi-Fi free.
Tony Glab, mother to Alexander and Christina, was adamant she wanted to send her son to a Wi-Fi free zone after learning the World Health Organization classified it as a potential carcinogen.
We have those lessons from history where we know that governments take often decades to respond and act in the interests of public health and safety, and that's clearly shown with asbestos and smoking and lead. So once again, this is one of these issues that potentially in 20, 30 years' time we may look back and say, gee, why did we do that to our children?
Students still have the use of computers, but they're hardwired, which means no radioactivity is emitted.
We wanted our children to understand that computers are a tool. They're not the first part of research. Or they don't have to be.
It's an idea that countries like France, Russia, Italy, China and Switzerland implemented in schools, kindergartens and daycare centres years ago. But yet Australia won't do it.
The exposure standards are not geared towards children, they're geared towards the 6-foot healthy man. I don't see a 6-foot healthy man in a childcare centre, a kindergarten or in most primary schools.
Australia's Wi-Fi safety guidelines haven't been updated for more than 10 years.
There's the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, which has criteria developed on how to do this with recommendations of wired, not wireless, hardwired phones, all devices on the desk. Ensure when you purchase devices that they have wired capability and a switch to disable the Wi-Fi, which is another important part. These are slides from a talk. I've done a couple talks to unions, and laptops should not be on the lap. This is like something that can happen starting today anywhere. It's too close to the body. The New Jersey Educational Association has recommendations, and they talk about all of this, plus remember your printers, your projectors, your wireless boards, so that you can reduce the frequencies within the classroom. Remember that, these are actually pictures from the wireless industry promo of wireless in Baltimore County schools. And when situations like this, there's exposure happening, of course, to the child and also to the children in front and around. Castle High School in Australia actually has a whole list of cell phone safety tips and cyberbullying. It's a great model for schools, especially private schools. This is our website, environmentalhealthtrust.org. And I hope you will visit it to learn more, and I'll be sending more information to you following up on everything that I just talked about. So I wanted to open up to your questions right now, understanding that we only have an hour. And you can, I'm trying to figure out how to turn, and I know that there is a way to turn on the sound so that I can hear you. Yes. When I first heard this, I was scared. I thought, what? A quick list of recommended fixes. Yes. So starting now, two things. One is understanding all the areas in your school where there are exposures and starting with a low-hanging fruit. What can be turned off? For example, turning things off when not in use is always a great first start. It gets a little complicated with IT depending on the network, but schools have absolutely done it. Our school did it. There's schools, we have a list of schools all around the country and the world that are doing this. So you need to be making changes in the way technology works in the school, and at the same time, education to staff and teachers on this issue. Having all phones turned off when not in use. And I'd like to add that there needs to be thinking about security and ensuring that you have whatever you need in place so that people can be connected, and for security issues as well. That's a whole conversation. So if you're like right now, I'm going to show you, I'm actually on a Mac right now. This is an adapter. So my Mac, this is, I can't show you because I'm using it, but this is an Ethernet cord that the computer I'm on right now is connected by Ethernet. And since I don't have an Ethernet, a way to connect by Ethernet, this would be, I have this adapter. This is an extra one for my girls that you plug in. You plug this into the laptop. The Ethernet goes into here. I have fast internet. I have no wireless on. And then you go to the laptop itself and you click it off, the wireless off at the top.
We need to be able to plug in our computer without using wireless. So we need to hardwire. Now, a Mac Air doesn't have that ability, except that I have discovered that you can use this device, plug it in to the side, and then open the browser, and we're online.
Another recommendation is if you're using computers and devices, have everything pre-downloaded instead of streaming or connecting online to the cloud. I use Google Docs at times, even though there are privacy issues, that's a whole other story. But there's a way that I can use it without having to be online. I actually work offline a lot because I know that this was my question was, well, why isn't the federal government doing anything? 20 years ago, 20 years ago now, the FDA asked NIH for a study to look at effects from long-term chronic exposure because they didn't have data on what the long-term impacts would be if a person is exposed long-term. And they said, we want well-done animal studies to address this question because we don't know what the long-term effects will be. So NIH embarked on a $30 million study with mice and rats exposed to levels which are non-thermal, meaning at non-heating levels, and found clear evidence of cancer in the male rats, and also DNA damage in certain groups of the mice and the rats as well. And now the FDA is saying that they reject the findings of the NIH. And so all of this is going on right now with federal agencies. We've been writing letters, scientists have been writing letters, asking the FDA to explain why they are rejecting the findings of NIH. And there's no accountability in our agencies. There's really no health and safety agency with authority to address the limits, which have to do with like what's ambient in the air, the maximum permissible exposure limits. The FDA is only tasked with addressing devices like phones and actual devices, but not the antennas.
Because of the widespread use of cell phones, even a small increase in risk would have a serious public health impact. And in the meantime, rather than telling people, if you are concerned, this is what you can do, the health agencies need to promote precautionary measures, especially for children and women, because in children, the risks could be greater due to the increased penetration, as well as the sensitivity of the developing brain to tissue-damaging agents. So finally, what is the lesson learned? We should no longer assume that any current or future wireless technology, including 5G, is safe without adequate testing, because to not do so is not ethical.
There's also a study in the last few minutes we have that looked at, it was in, Dr. Hardell published this, looking at the exposures in different schools in Sweden. And they found the lowest exposure was in the classroom where the routers were not near the class, where the devices were off, where the teachers had wired computers, and higher exposures were, of course, video streaming. This is a whole issue, is when you use wireless, when are the exposures the highest? And video streaming is one example. Like if you have to watch a video or something, have it be pre-downloaded and put it up on the screen for everyone to watch, and not to use virtual reality where they put phones in these cardboard things that then you put on the eyes. This is happening, I know, in public school systems all over. But there's been no respect for how the eyes will be then exposed to those frequencies. I mean, we don't even test phones in positions with the phone in front of the eyes for pre-market safety testing. And certainly no one's even looked at what the long-term effects will be from that at the federal level. I know something that I've done is sit down with teachers and go over, what do you need in your classroom? What do you need to teach in terms of technology? And really going point by point over, okay, how do we get you that, but in a safer way? Because there are a lot of challenges, and they're detailed challenges. Like one teacher said to me, well, we need to sit in a circle. I want to be able to have eye contact with all the kids so that when they're looking up from doing their research, I can see them. How am I going to do that on wires? How do I, how do we really implement this? And there are ways that you can run the wires. There's also these, basically there's these strips where you can plug in the Ethernet as well as the electricity that you can like run on the walls so that everyone can be connected by a wire rather than having it to be wireless. There's also I think I sent this out, but Bert Wolf did an investigation into this, which is absolutely excellent and a great way to learn about this issue. It's on cell phone safety. He has 2 20-minute pieces. They run on PBS. They kind of talk about the history and recommendations and what everyone can do.
Cell phone, and I use it often. It's a basic part of my everyday life, and it's almost essential for my work. Could I live without it? Sure, but it would make a lot of things difficult. My smartphone keeps me in touch with my family. It keeps me in touch with my film crew. Where are you guys? It shows me how to get around the locations where we are working. It gives me instant access to research. Everyone in my family has a smartphone, and they use it often. Everyone I know has a smartphone, and they use it often. And we're not planning on giving them up. Are there real health problems? And if there are, what are they? And what can we do about them? That is what I'm going to try and find out as we travel around.
And I think education going to the very early grades about technology is really important, because kids at all ages are using wireless devices and are unaware, their parents are unaware that there is this exposure, which independent scientists are calling for caution on. Whereas there are statements, and these are to groups which are industry connected, which say that's not credible, or there is no science. There is science. And many of the researchers who are speaking on this they are credible. They are often retired, actually, because it's very challenging to be working on this issue and maintain your job, because there are many examples of scientists who are attacked after they publish on this or when they begin to speak on this.
I moved to California, Southern California. The 60 hertz work that we did was supported by a contract from the Department of Energy. The radio frequency radiation work that we did was supported by Motorola. The relationship was really very cordial and very stress-free, but only up until we started generating data. These folks were very, very upset and began to talk about how are they going to handle this, what sort of spin can we put on this, what can we expect from this, and from that point on the relationship changed. What we saw was that Motorola began to exert more and more control over the work, telling us what to do, telling us how to write abstracts, what to say in the abstracts, what to say in the papers. I said, how to do the work. No, don't do this. Yes, do it this way. This was unacceptable. I had completed our study of DNA damage, and I submitted the final report to Motorola, and I got a call from Mays Swycord at Motorola. Now, Mays is the former head of the Center for, CDRA, Center for Devices and Radiological Health at the FDA, and he left the FDA and went to work for Motorola. Keep that connection in mind. That's interesting. He also handpicked his successor at the FDA. Anyhow, Mays didn't like the work. Then there was another phone call. Point is, I kept getting nothing from these people. They simply weren't willing to accept my interpretation of my study, my evaluation of my study, my knowledge of science at that point, and tried to urge me not to publish the study. They didn't tell me not to. They just said, no, this isn't ready for publication. And they wanted me to do more work. I stopped taking calls from them, and I went ahead and published the study. It came out in 1998, and I wanted nothing more to do with any Motorola-related work. I wasn't going to put up with that kind of control. I wouldn't put up with that attitude. That was it. I think one has to exercise caution at this point, and what makes...
I have organized and coordinated a European study called Reflex. This study was dealing with basic effects caused by LVMF, extremely low frequency electromagnetic fields, and radio frequency electromagnetic fields. We did this study with the money of the European Commission, and we thought that with this essay we could show that there is nothing that there are no basic effects caused by the radiation, basic effects which are in some way related to the development of chronic diseases. That was the working hypothesis, but the results were opposite. The results showed that ELF EMF as well as RF EMF are able to change the structure and the function of genes in human cells.
And what was the response?
Yeah, as always in this area of research, results of significance which are not in the interest of those who have the money and the power are not well accepted. That's what we know for 100 years now. In our case, our study, our results was first ignored for 2-3 years. When that was not possible anymore, our results were criticized, heavily criticized. And when that was again not possible anymore, a scandal was created. It was claimed that the data obtained at the medical university in Vienna would have been fabricated. This message went all over the world, started in Germany, went all over the world. And of course, the medical university of Vienna was in trouble, and they set up an ethics committee. But the ethics committee could not provide any proof that the fabrication, the fraud, has really happened. The same happened to the editors of the journals where these papers had been published. They were also under heavy pressure. Which an editor is not interested to publish a paper which has been fabricated. How do they call it? Anyway, they have also asked their reviewers, is it possible that these data are fabricated? And the answer of the reviewers was again no. That means, in spite of the heavy pressure on the University of Vienna, on the editors of 2 reputable journals, Mutation Research, for example, the other one, International Archives of Occupational Health, they refused to take the papers out of their journals. They are still part of the scientific literature, in spite of the pressure. And of course, for us, for the authors of these papers, it was an experience which they will never forget in their life.
I'm so appreciative that you did that good work, and I'm sorry that you had so much trouble. What would you recommend based on what you're seeing in your work and in others?
Yeah, our work has in the meantime been confirmed by 3 other groups. These publications, the 3 publications, are partly submitted, partly in preparation, but I have the data, I have them in my hands at the moment. Anyway, we know that the results which have been obtained at the medical university in Vienna are correct. Related to the meeting here, the results show that high-frequency electromagnetic fields are able to damage the genes and the function of the genes. And this has, of course, some relationship to what we find in the epidemiological research. Our data support these findings. Our data provide the mechanism which are asked for when I have data coming from the epidemiology. When there's no explanation how this data could arise, they are not credible. But if there are mechanisms which explain why this happened, why there is an increase in the brain tumor rate, it's a strong support for the validity of epidemiological data.
Is your work supporting the work of Lai and same in Gandhi, you know, with the Comet assay and the DNA, double-strand DNA?
Henry Lai's work has been done 14 years ago, the first time. It was similar things happened to him too. He was accused too as if his work would have been nothing but rubbish. And we can say our data support his findings, while our data have been obtained in vitro in the laboratory. His data have been obtained in living animals and are even more important as compared to others. But both set of data, his and ours, support the epidemiological finding, give them credibility. That is it. And that's the reason why his data, our data, have been treated so badly.
And how about for children?
Yes, that is a special problem. Badly investigated so far. The radiation with children is much higher as compared to adults. That depends on their smaller size of the head, the higher amount of fluidity in the brain. The radiation penetrates the brain stronger, about double as high as compared to adults. This is one problem. The other problem is we have a long latency period before, for example, cancer arises. The same will be true for Alzheimer's too. While adult people, let me say 50, 60-year-old people, might not survive the development of chronic disease, cancer or Alzheimer's disease, a young person will certainly survive the time, live as long as this disease needs to develop. The latency period is very important in the development of chronic diseases. In old people it doesn't play a major role, but in young people it's decisive. In my understanding, more important as compared to the double as high uptake of radiation in children.
So your general recommendation for kids using?
Yeah, I personally would, I'm a grandfather, my grandsons and granddaughters don't use the mobile phone. It's easy to be said, difficult to be done. It depends on the parents, how they see the situation. And in my understanding, it depends also on the living conditions. Sometimes it's important that a child gets assistance from the grown-up, from the parents, and if it's far away, the best system to get help is, of course, the phone, the mobile phone. One has to be cautious. I would advise no mobile phone at all, but under certain conditions and under the control by the parents, by grown up. We cannot exclude the use of a mobile phone for children 100%. But we should lower the use as much as possible.
Thank you so much.
And I'm
honored to be speaking with you today. At age 13, I am fortunate to have the opportunity to voice my concerns about wireless radiation and speak up for my generation. Every day, my friends carry their phones, tablets, and other wireless devices on their bodies, with complete trust that everything is safe. But I decided to do some further research, and I was surprised to find that no one has ever claimed that the levels of wireless radiation we are exposed to daily are safe. This led me to ask some questions. Are the devices we use every day harming our health? What facts are already known and what still needs to be discovered? Who is conducting the needed research? Most importantly, why is no one telling young people that we could be at risk for serious health and reproductive problems? I'm here today to say my generation has a right to know. We must know the truth about the risks we are facing with cell towers, routers, and multiple devices around us all day and night. So today I am calling on the FCC, the wireless industry, and the science and medical communities to share the truth, to join with us and recommend caution. I am asking for more extensive, unbiased research. I am asking our guardians to teach kids how to use tech with reasonable precautions to minimize exposure. Our future depends on adults doing the right thing now. Not tomorrow, not in 10 years, but now. The words of Bill Moyers convey the urgency I feel regarding children's health and wireless technology. We seem to prefer a comfortable lie to the uncomfortable truth. We punish those who point out reality and reward those who provide us with the comfort of illusion.
Did you know that cell phone, the one in your pocket, emits radio frequency radiation? As long as your phone's turned on, even if you're not talking or texting.
The American Academy of Pediatrics in over a dozen countries recommends reducing children's exposure to wireless radiation.
When using a cell phone, I always keep it away from my body. I use speakerphone or a headset like this.
To stop microwave exposure, I put my phone on airplane mode and turn off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth function.
I hold the phone at a distance and make sure it's not touching my body.
Cell phones are not toys. Children's brains and bodies are still developing and are vulnerable to wireless radiation. Practice safe and responsible habits with yourself and your children.
When using the computer, I always try to make sure my connection is corded, not wireless.
Remember not to use your cell phone in the car. The phone works at higher power in metal surroundings and bounces around, increasing your family's radiation exposure.
For their safety.
For your safety.
Because children are more vulnerable.
Remind them.
Remind yourself.
To limit your microwave radiation exposures. Probably the most important thing I did, I was involved as a young scientist in the committee that actually reviewed the data and recommended that there be no smoking on airplanes. You may be shocked to hear that it was even a question for science at the time, but it was. And when I look at what we know now about mobile phone radiation, I see some very interesting similarities.
A growing number of prominent doctors and scientists are raising warning flags over radiation this morning, and your kids could be facing a greater risk of exposure.
I think the most important study is a study by the National Toxicology Program in a classic large carcinogenicity test, one of the largest ever performed, and for that matter, one of the most expensive. They found increased risk of the tumours which we believe radiofrequency radiation is causing in man. Particular tumours called schwannomas. In the rats, they were in the heart. In humans, they're often in the nerve, the ear nerve, the vestibular nerve.
Cell phone providers say they follow all safety guidelines put into place by the FCC. The current FCC safety standard was developed nearly 20 years ago.
The manufacturers actually tell people in the instruction manual, which I've never read, not to put the cell phone against your ear.
It does say exactly that. There's the BlackBerry, for example, warns to keep your phone at least 0.98 inches away from the body when transmitting. With an iPhone, for example, it's 5/8 of an inch.
At this point, the evidence has become sufficiently strong that cell phone radiation is a human carcinogen.
A major development from California's Department of Public Health. High use of cell phones may be linked to certain types of cancer and other health effects, including brain cancer and tumors, lower sperm counts, headaches, and effects on learning, memory, hearing, behavior, and sleep.
If it was a real problem, I would know. If it was a real problem, the government would protect us. How come I'm not hearing about this? They're all things I've heard when I give seminars. You know, I get up there and they say, oh yeah, if this was really a problem, they would have told us. I am they. I am a, legitimate scientist, and I am telling you.